everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we're very thankful you take the time from your busy day to watch our program. To all our viewers, I'd like to offer an apology. I do not believe in all the years we've been doing this program that we have had two repeats in a row. Sometimes life gets in the way, and our sincere apologies to our viewing audience for that. I'd also like to give a shout out to Howard. Howard, I want to thank you so much for being the dedicated viewer that you are, and I want to thank you for your search for truth and knowing that we can have effect using truth. So Howard, thank you for watching, and know that you are in good hands with our friend Andy, and we hope that you recover very soon. Okay, a lot going on in the world, folks. We're going to get back into the document that we have been studying, Tango Michael Sierra Whiskey 7905.1. But before that, in the last 3 weeks, a tremendous amount has happened in the world, particularly with the appointment of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. I personally was very disappointed in this selection. I hope history proves me wrong. This gentleman is an insider's insider. I did some studying. I studied about 6 pages of some court cases and some, when he wrote for decisions. And what really came across with me a lot is that he's an insider. For example, in 2015, when all the Snowden revelations came out, he said that what the NSA was doing to the American people, quote unquote, is entirely consistent with the Fourth Amendment. Totally disagree. The Fourth Amendment is quite plain and simple in its language, that we are protected from search and seizure without a warrant and probable cause, and what things are to be searched and seized and so forth. Spying Mr. Kavanaugh on the American people without a warrant, without any due process, is not entirely consistent with the Fourth Amendment. In 2011, he dissented on a jurisdictional grounds with regards to, well, I won't get into this too deep. I'm just going to, folks, I'm wasting too much time on this. Let me just put it this way. 2011, he dissented, and 2000 on a very important case, which basically was the roadmap to Obamacare coming into fruition. In 2006, he said that he would not put his personal views into Roe versus Wade. Now, I like not putting your personal views into Roe versus Wade or anything, because the Supreme Court, who, by the way, granted itself its own power to do what it does now. You know, the Supreme Court went against Andrew Jackson when he was president on something that was quite instrumental in our country's history, and President Jackson said, well, let the Supreme Court enforce it then. At that time, they had no enforcing ability. They were not supposed to be one to the courts were never to be one to dictate policy or dictate law in the sense of implementing law. That was supposed to be all done through a legislative process. The courts, you know, the President of the United States or the people vote on something, not one judge, because of his personal views, is supposed to be able to say, no, I'm not going to allow this. They don't have the right to say they're not going to allow or allow. That's been a self-granted right. But in 2006, Roe versus Wade, what he said was that because it's already in law, it would be binding by the precedent set by the Supreme Court. In 2008, a Second Amendment case that was very instrumental in, and what he wrote, and I'm reading this verbatim here, is that firearms have not been traditionally banned. So with Roe versus Wade, we've got this precedent sent by the Supreme Court that yes, we can murder babies. But with firearms, he comes out and says that they have not been traditionally banned. Well, what happened to shall not be infringed? you have a precedent set for killing babies. You have a precedent set for the Second Amendment. But yet the one for the Second Amendment doesn't stand because they've not been traditionally banned. So, but if they become banned, I'll go along with it. But if we're going to murder babies, that precedent's already been set. 2015, he dissented on the Obamacare when a bunch of a class action lawsuit by religious organizations took the Obamacare contraception mandate to court. And he dissented on that. And that was in his circuit. In 2017, he dissented on net neutrality. So, folks, this guy, anything that's important that is important to the elite, to the powers to be, if he can't vote with it, he dissents on it. You understand? And this is I 6 pages of reading this guy's history, and someone asked me, well, what would you give Trump for the grade for appointing him? And I'll tell you what, I'll be extremely generous, and I will say a B-, and we'll hope for the best. All right, let us continue. Now, another thing that's going on, and you remember this young lady, Lisa Page. This lady was the person who basically is an attorney and had all of the letters part of the insurance plan to make sure Trump didn't become president. Well, as of yesterday, her attorney gets back to the Congress, who subpoenaed her, and she says, and the attorney says, we are choosing, this is according to Mark Meadows, a congressman, that the attorney wrote that we, meaning Lisa Page and her attorney, are choosing to ignore a congressional subpoena. Well, what would happen to you and I if you and I did that, huh? The state police or the feds would be at your door in no time. But you see, the Congress has lost all authority and all power. No one in power in the deep state fears the Congress, folks, because most of them are completely corrupted to begin with. And number two, their power has been usurped through things of the courts and through things of concentrating power in the executive branch. This is why they're very upset. The powers to be are very upset about Trump controlling that position. But think about this, folks. Peter Strzok's, the FBI, and the DOJ are now all officially in contempt of Congress. The Justice Department is in contempt of Congress. The FBI is in contempt of Congress for not following subpoenas and mandated information that was demanded, not requested, demanded. Has anyone been fined? Anyone been relieved of position? Anyone gone to jail? Anyone been threatened? No. Nobody. So Miss Lisa Page is very confident of what's going on here. All right? Because she knows who's in control. And it's not the Congress. Let us continue. You remember this individual, George Soros. Well, we find out now with the investigation that's going on that George Soros is, of course, behind a lot of this Russian collusion thing. The Clintons are all behind it. But doing a little bit of research, I found out that the people that are actually part of this Russian collusion investigation into the Trump administration, which is complete facade, all 13 are former Obama administrators or worked in the Department of Justice. This has been going on for 16 months. Over $30 million have been spent, and now they're requesting some more millions. And what is going on? Nothing. They can't find anything. And now, because they can't find anything and they're trying to cover up their own tracks, Uranium One and all the rest of it, they're all in contempt of Congress. This is why they're in contempt of Congress, because if they sent this information over to the Congress to be viewed, they would find out that these were the folks actually committing the crimes. So, on a lighter note, Mr. George Soros is continuing his efforts to undermine our republic. Now, one other thing I want to say about Mr. Soros here, And listen to this quote, and I know I read this to you some years ago, but he's talking about, this was the migration into Europe at the time, which is now here, coming here. This is George Soros. Our plan treats the protection of refugees as objective and national borders as the obstacle. You hear what he just said? Our plan. So this isn't some kind of organic, spontaneous, movement, refugee immigration movement. This is our plan. This is orchestrated. This is implemented. This is financed. This is logistically supported. You get it? Treats the protection of refugees as objective. In other words, that's going to be the whole goal, that they're going to sell it to the people, whatever country that this asymmetrical form of warfare is going to be used against, and national borders as the obstacle. Well, folks, if you don't have borders, you don't have a nation. It's that simple. It's really that simple. Okay, let us continue. Mr. Putin literally came out with a great quote, and I thought it was really acquiesced to was today. Now, this was just about 3 months ago, and this is when he's speaking at a conference in front of a bunch of American and Western journalists, and he said, "People who destroy whole nations do not have the right to teach us democracy and the values of living freely." Who do you think that was pointed at? The United States and the Western world, of course. Because it's the United States and the Western worlds being controlled by the international bankers that have been destroying whole nations. Mr. Putin, I tell you, the more I study this man, the more I have become to really respect his understanding of history, his understanding of what's at stake, and the courage to act the way he has acted. Let us continue. This was an incredible drawing, and this is actually Joseph Mengele. Now, Joseph Mengele, I know they don't know a lot about this gentleman, but this is Dr. Death from Auschwitz. And listen to this quote, and I think this is so important, because this is what's frustrated me since the 1970s, when I had an experience in the Marine Corps that made me ask questions, and every time I found an answer, it brought on more questions and more answers and more questions to this road to where I am today, some 40 years later, 40 plus years later. Listen to this quote. Joseph Mengele, Dr. Death, Auschwitz. "The more we do to you, the less you seem to believe it." Think of that. The more we do to you, the less you seem to believe it. Folks, he is speaking in third person and to the victims of what they're doing to us. And we collectively seem less and less to believe it as they take us deeper and deeper into this abyss of tyranny and subject servitude. Let us continue. This is an incredible drawing, folks. I've never seen a picture of Mengele in uniform, and obviously this is a drawing. This might be something that he had asked for, and judging by the background, and I'm thinking this might be the eagle's nest, although I don't know that for certain. Let us continue. Mr. Lord Acton. Mr. Lord Acton, who knew everything about the bankers because he was one of them, and who actually was rich beyond all, but as he got older, he understood the stakes of what was going on. Now, listen to this warning from Lord Acton. "The issue which has swept down the centuries and which will have to be fought sooner or later is the people versus the bankers. The issue which has swept down the centuries and which will have to be fought sooner or later is the people versus the bankers. This is the battle, the war that is being waged against humanity today. And some of their modus operandi is the document that we have been studying for the last, I think we're on week 6. Now listen to this, another warning from Lord Acton. And this has to do with being indoctrinated. The man who prefers his country before any other duty shows the same spirit as the man who surrenders every right to the state. They both deny that right is superior to authority. You see, folks, what he's saying here is they can wrap it in a flag, or they can wrap it in religious dogma. Not spiritual, religious dogma. But what he's talking about here is they'll wrap it in a flag and convince the poor people of a nation that they have to go and kill other poor people of other nations. They wrap it in that flag, folks. That's what he's talking about. And then he talks about it's the same spirit as the man who surrenders every right to the state. As in, if you surrender all your rights to the state, you no longer have rights. You now have benefits that can be taken away and or altered. But it's the same mindset. The mindset that you have to commit yourself to something other than the rights that are ordained from us and are unalienable according to our founding documents that are from our Creator, not from our country, our government, our state. That's the spirit that he's speaking of. And that same spirit has cost many, many men and women their lives and untold sufferings. This is what Lord Acton is speaking of. And when he speaks this issue which has swept down the centuries and which will have to be fought sooner or later is the people versus the bankers. If you take anything away, my folks, from this show, understand that war is currently in effect. It's symmetrical, it's asymmetrical. It's the Hegelian dialectic crisis reaction solution that they use to bring us along, and it's also capturing our sweat equity, our intelligence, our process of reasoning and thinking. This is the spirit that is shown by a person, whether it be for the indoctrination of country or whether it be in the indoctrination of surrendering rights to the state. It all winds up with the same end result, that you will lose your rights and you will recognize yourself as a benefactor of benefits given to me by a foreign entity. And that's exactly what Lord Acton was speaking about. You know, another quick thing, I wrote this down. I don't want to get into it too much, but listen to this. This is Obama's #1 donor. This was in 2012. Destroying America will be the culmination of my life's work. My main concern is the New World Order. Unbelievable, folks, but that's where we're at. And this takes us to Leo Tolstoy. And I use this quote to get into this into this document. The essence of all slavery consists in taking the product of another's labor by force. It is immaterial whether this force be founded upon ownership of the slave or ownership of the money that he must get to live. Because, folks, if you own one or the other, or both. You control the sweat equity or the energy of that said people. Now, let us be real quick and do a quick review. Real quick. Okay. This is in May of 1979. This is a document, Tango Michael Sierra Whiskey 705.1. Now, I've said this before, folks. Yeah, we're all being watched, but if you don't want to be flagged and seriously flagged, do not go pull this up on your private computer. Go to the library, go somewhere if you want to get a hard copy of this document. Tango Michael Sierra Whiskey 7905.1, excuse me. Real quick, I'm going to just be real quick. It was soon recognized by those in positions of power that the same methods might be useful in controlling a society, but better tools were necessary. Social engineering, the analysis and augmentation of a society requires the correlation of great amounts of constantly changing economic information or data. So a high-speed computerized data processing system was necessary which could race ahead of the society and predict when society would arrive for capitulation. What is that? Surrendering, giving up to. Okay. Then we get into some of the computer work from 46, some of the mathematician George Danzig in 47, the transistor in 48 by Barden and Baton and Shockley. And you thought Al Gore invented the internet. And then, of course, it gets on here. Immediately, the Rockefeller Foundation got in on the ground floor by making grants. Okay, so we understand the Rockefeller Foundation in 79 continued to finance a lot of this studies, okay? Now, go back with me here a little bit. There's a brief little thing on history. The Quiet War was quietly, the Quiet War was quietly declared by the international elite at a meeting held in 1954. That would be the Bilderberg meeting, my friends. And also, the document that came out of this is known as Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. We have, and don't go looking that one up either unless you don't mind being red flagged. But we read that entire document to you some years ago, verbatim. Okay, this is a follow-up, 1954, this is 1979 that we're studying now because why the technology grew, okay? They were talking about how they needed the technology. Okay, although the silent weapon system was nearly exposed 13 years later, the evolution of the new weapon system has never suffered any major setbacks. The new weapon system is what we are reading to you now. Let us continue. In 1954, it was well recognized by those in positions of authority that it was only a matter of time, only a few decades, before the general public would be able to grasp and upset the cradle of power. For the very elements of the new silent weapon technology were as accessible for the public utopia as they were for providing our private utopia. So that's 1954. Within 9 years, 1964, I know there's 10, but folks, with the 9 years of working, they took over the education system in every school in this country. And don't say, oh, they didn't take over the parochial schools. Oh, yeah, they did. They wanted their tax breaks like they took over the churches with the Johnson Act, right? Same thing, folks. Control the money. Amshire Rothschild, give me control of the nation's currency. I care not who makes its laws. Why? Because you're going to control everything. That's what they're talking about here. So what are they after? The issue of primary concern, that of dominance, not of benevolence, dominance, revolved around the subject of the energy sciences. Okay, now we get into this to a lot of degree. Energy is recognized as the key to all activity on Earth. Natural science is the study of the sources and control of natural energy, and social science, theoretically expressed as economics, is the study of the sources and control of the social energy. Sources and control of your sweat equity. Both are bookkeeping systems, mathematics. Therefore, mathematics is the primary energy science, and the bookkeeper can be king if the public can be kept ignorant of the methodology of the bookkeeping. You got that? And now you know what Common Core is all about. Because 2 plus 2 in the real world equals 4. But 2 plus 2 with Common Core doesn't always equal 4, does it? All right, let us continue. Now we're going to get into, real briefly, security. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the augmentation of a society i.e. the engineering of social automation systems, the silent weapons, on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, i.e. slavery and genocide. So what is their goal? Their goal is extensive objective of social control and destruction of human life, i.e. slavery and genocide. Let us continue. This manual in itself is an analog declaration of intent. What's the intent? Objectives of social control, destruction of human life, i.e. slavery and genocide. Such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny. Otherwise, it might be recognized as a technically formal declaration of domestic war. Furthermore, whenever any person or group of persons in a position of great power and without the full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodology for economic conquest, thereafter what our sweat equity, must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between said person or group of persons and the public. The solution of today's problems requires an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no agonizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. Okay, I want to stop there. I know we've read some of that before. I just wanted to give you a real brief synopsis of their intents, of their goals, of their technology, of their modus operandi, and of their history and security. All done right there real quick. Now, let us continue. I know I got into some of this before, but what we had started was we were going to get into short list of inputs and short list of outputs. And this is a short list, folks, okay? But what the inputs are is what mechanisms they have available to them to collect data on us, create portfolios on us, and create analogs on us. This is how Amazon, with a 92% rating, 92% effectiveness, can predict from watching you and collecting all the data on you and making a portfolio on you and using analogs on you, that they can, with a 92% efficiency, can predict not only when you're going to order something, but what you're going to order, and usually have it packaged prior. Think of that. We read that to you verbatim. Okay, I've read some of this before. I want to be real quick here for the sake of time, and then I will slow down when we get to where we held off last time. Short list of inputs. Understand this is what they need to know and how they're going to get it. Okay, the questions to be answered. What? 1, what? 2, when? 3, where? 4, how? 5, why? And 6, who? General sources of information. Now remember, this is 1979. Telephone tape, and that's exactly what it says, telephone tape. See, folks, it wasn't all digital. The system wasn't digital then. Folks, I moved to Vermont in 1985, and in 1985, if I wanted to make a long-distance phone call, I had to get the operator, tell her my phone number, and then she would connect me outside of my region and get me to the long distance that I was needed. Okay, that was 1985. This is 1979. So general sources of information: 1, telephone tape; 2, surveillance; 3, analysis of garbage; 4, behavior of children in school. And they have other examples. I want to be quick. Standard of living by analyzing food, clothing, shelter, transportation. In other words, what scale of food you eat, you know? What's the percentage of your budget that goes into food? What type of food are you eating? Your clothing. Are you going to secondhand stores, or are you going to, Macy's down on Fifth Avenue? You know where that is. Shelter. What's your neighborhood like? What do you take care of your house? What's your house value? All these economic factors come into play. Transportation. Do you have a car? What type of car do you have? How much do you use the car? How much do you travel? All these type of things. Social contacts, telephone records, itemized call of telephone records, family histories, marriage certificates, birth certificates, etc., friends, associates, etc., memberships of organizations, and all political affiliations. Folks, there's more. I'm just trying to get real quick here. The personal paper trail. Personal buying habits, i.e. personal consumer preferences. All records of checking accounts, records of credit card purchases, tagged credit card purchases, the credit card purchases of products bearing UPC codes. See, folks, this is before the day in the public of RFID chips. I think Gillette was the first company to put RFID chips on their products, and I believe that was 1984. I believe, but don't hold that to me. So anyway, this is 1979, and they're only using things that for tagged credit card purchases with things where the purchase is bearing the UPC, Universal Product Code. Okay? Universal, it's everywhere. Product, it's the item. And what's code? Remember the word code? Traffic code, IRS code, UCMJ, all these codes, right? Remember the word code? We get the word code from the Latin word coda, to be altered secretly. Let us continue. Assets. Checking accounts, savings accounts, real estate, businesses, automobile purchases, etc. Safety at deposits at banks, etc. Stock market portfolios, etc. Liabilities, creditors, enemies, and it has a note here, see legal. 3, loans and consumer credit. In other words, what's your debt to income ratio? That's what they're looking at there, okay? All right. Government sources, welfare, Social Security, USDA, surplus foods, doles, grants, subsidies, etc. Government sources via intimidation. I'm not making that up. That is in the writing. Government sources via intimidation. I got a question for you. By the Department of Homeland Security's definition of terrorism, isn't that the definition of terrorism? Using intimidation to get one, intimidation or fear to get one to act as one desires? That's the definition of terrorism by the Department of Homeland Security. But then again, who's the number one threat in the Department of Homeland Security's terrorist watch list? You got it. Remember that? Veterans. Remember that? We read that all to you verbatim. Excuse me. Government sources via intimidation. Now, who do you think is the number one agency that strikes the fear in every American the most? It's not a government agency. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's a quasi-government agency, but it's literally a collective service within the government for the private bank Federal Reserve. That's what it is. If you remember, the Grace Committee came right out and said in the 1980s that not one nickel, that was their words, not one nickel of income taxes that the American public pays goes to the operations of the U.S. government. It all goes to the Federal Reserve Bank. Private, for-profit banking corporation. Federal Reserve. Number one, government source via intimidation, Internal Revenue Service. Number 2, OSHA. 3, Census. 4, and then it just goes, etc. Because government has been completely weaponized against the American people, against the peoples of the world for that matter. Let us continue. Okay, the principle of this ploy, the citizen will almost always make the collection of information easy if the citizen can operate on the free sandwich principle of eat now and pay later. And then it has a little side note here, other government sources, and it gets into things like the census and others. But then it goes right on to, number 1, U.S. Mail or Postal Service. Thank you very much. Habits, strengths and weaknesses, activities, sports, hobbies, etc. 2, legal, fear, anger, etc. Criminal records, hospital records, drug sensitivities, reaction to pain meds, etc. And to pain. Not just pain meds, reaction to pain medications and pain. Psychiatric records, their fears, angers, disgust, adaptability, reactions to stimuli, violence, suggestibility to hypnosis, pain, pleasure, love, and sex. That's right, folks. They know they got a whole portfolio on every single intimate thing that you can think of about your personal life. Believe me. Methods of coping of adaptability and behavior. Consumption of alcohol, consumption of drugs. How much entertainment? Religious factors influencing behavior. Oh, there's a big one. Other methods of escaping from reality. Religious factors influencing behavior. Now you know why, with the Johnson Act and the IRS code being implemented, that they had to take over the churches. They made them all 501c3 IRS churches. So what? So they would control the criteria just like they control the criteria in the indoctrination services you know as the public fool system. Same. And this is why Christianity, according to Albert Pike in 1871, and many others for that matter, as recently as 30 days ago, why Christianity is the number one enemy to the powers to be. Because Christianity is based on rights from our Creator. Christianity is based on love and service to an entity outside of the government. Christianity mandates that we are loyal to our Creator, and that government is subjective to the governed. And what's the number one unit in Christianity, my friends? The family. And when we study all these documents, we know that what had to be destroyed? The family. This is why California now recognizes 42 genders. That's right. That XY chromosome thing, you can throw that all out. That don't matter anymore. 42 genders. And you know what? I think I read it to you some months ago that there's a bill in California to recognize artificial intelligence as a gender. Let us continue. Payment modus operandi, payment on time, etc., payment of telephone bills, etc. You notice how the telephone keeps coming back, all our communications? Energy purchases, electric, gas, etc., water purchases, payments of loans, house payments, automobile payments, payments on credit cards, etc., etc., etc. Every financial transaction you make that's not part of the underground economy, they have a record of it. Okay, this is where we stopped some weeks ago. So now I'm going to slow it down a little bit and sort of break things down a little more. And I'm already running out of time, and I apologize. Okay, political sensitivity. 1, beliefs. 2, contracts. 3, positions. 4, strengths and weaknesses. 5, projects and activities. So political sensitivity. Do you remember, folks, in the beginning of this, they always talked about shocking a system. They used the analogy of the airframe and how they would shock the system on an aircraft, take it to different speeds, different climbing ratios, different barometric pressures at different speeds, all these different factors that make up coefficiencies in aviation. They would shock the plane purposely. And there's some very brave people that still do this. They're known as test pilots, okay? But they purposely will shock the airframe or the aircraft to see what the airframe, with this different material and design, what stimuli it will absorb and what coefficiencies will be altered. Well, that was the analogy they used for the students that were learning this in 1979, because this is a new science in 1979. So what they've done now is they throw economic stimuli into the economy. For instance, gas in the 1970s. We were an oil exporting country. Lindsey Williams' book, The Energy Non-Crisis, got into how they shut down Prudhoe Bay up in Alaska and many other places. Now, we all know it's because of economic reasons. Because when there was no more gold or silver to back the petrodollar, they needed someone to buy treasury bonds to keep the boat afloat based on debt. And you're the co-surety to the debt. So what they did was they went to Saudi Arabia and said, hey, we are going to form OPEC. That's right, folks. The United States, the bankers formed OPEC. And we're going to go to you, Saudi Arabia. We're going to make you rich beyond all you can believe. We're going to protect you militarily. We're not going to get involved in your domestic affairs. We're going to buy our oil from you. And in exchange, you are going to take a percentage of your earnings, and you're going to buy these things called treasury bonds to keep this debt instrument afloat. So what they do? They formed OPEC. There was the shortage, and then what was that? Boom, an economic shock stimuli. And they wanted to see what the American people would put up with. How much they would take. What were their traveling habits changed? Because now it costs more to go to work every day, it costs more for your heating fuel, it costs more for your natural gas, your propane, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Inflation went through the roof because everything is shipped using petroleum. So what an economic stimuli. So what they do? They analyzed, well, what did the American people take their monies from? Did they take it from their entertainment budget? Did they take it from their food budget? Did they not travel as much? Were they not buying the Macy's Fifth Avenue clothes anymore? This is what they're always analyzing, folks. And they do it in a broad sense of the word, and they do it individually to you and I individually. Let us continue. Then they want to know exactly your contracts, what your beliefs, your positions, your strengths and weaknesses, and your projects and activities. In other words, what are you a couch goer, or are you in the battle? And to what level are you in the battle? And what side of the divide paradigm that we have set up are you hooked into? Are you hooked into our divide paradigm? Because if you're not, we're really going to pay attention to you now. What was it James Clapper said? We don't investigate, NSA director, we do not investigate bad people. We investigate interesting people. You see, because if you're wrapped in their plantation, then I don't care if you're murdering babies or if you're beating up a 90-year-old woman, what happened 2 days ago by a Muslim thug in this country, or the three brothers that raped the 13 and 14-year-old sisters. They don't care about that, folks, because they're useful idiots, the people perpetrating these crimes, you see. Because now we need more authority, we need more police, we need more taxes to support the police, we need more laws. We need to restrict your liberties because of these evil people that we're allowed to come into your country. Asymmetrical warfare. So they want to know if you're not part of that divide paradigm or not. If you're not on their plantation, folks, that's the people, like James Clapper said, that makes you interesting. Let us continue. Legal inputs, behavior control, excuses for investigation, search, arrest, or employment of force to modify behavior. You see? Oh man, we got to have these roadblocks. We got this terrible drunk driving thing going on. Oh man, we gotta prod you when you get to the airport because of 9/11. The border's wide open. Don't worry about all these illegals coming in, but we gotta prod you. That is an excuse that, and then they'll find out who and what percentage of the public will accept that excuse. Janet Reno at Waco. We killed the babies for the sake of the babies. Where was the riots in the street over that statement? Didn't happen. That was a shock stimuli. You get it? This is what they're talking about. But now they're looking at behavioral control through excuses for investigation, search, arrest, or employment of force. What is employment of force to modify behavior? Think of that. They're constantly trying to modify our behavior. And I'll tell you what their number one force is, because it was on this page right here. Using government what? Intimidation. Government sources via intimidation. What was the number one? IRS. So excuses for roadblocks, excuses for taking your rights away, excuses are all done through that Hegelian dialectic that I've been telling you folks. You have got to study this. You have got to understand this simple triangle. Crisis, reaction, solution. Create the crisis. Oh, the drunk driver's got to get the emotional response you want from the people. Oh, I'm afraid to go out now. I'm really upset about this person that got hurt by this drunk driver, and bring in the solution, which is roadblocks and taking away your rights of travel freely. That's just one example. But do you get it? The government brings in all the heroin and cocaine. They did it in the 70s. Hell, the East India Trade Company, look up the two opium wars of the 1800s. Two, not one. What was that? Controlling the behavior of a society through implementing a very detrimental, very dangerous and addictive drug. There was 2 wars over the control of that, folks. They're actually called the Opium Wars. Please look them up. The government, U.S. government, through the bankers, and who was in charge of all the cocaine operations in the 80s? He was head of the CIA. His operation name was Black Rose. You knew him as George Herbert Walker Bush. And his father just happened to be the fund manager between the Brown Brothers Harriman Union Bank of New York and the Reich Bank of Germany to bring in the guys like Mengele that we just demonstrated to you, that said to the German people and the Polish people, the more we do to you, the less you seem to believe it. Behavioral control. Let us continue. And folks, they're using everything. The churches, the schools, the entertainment, the NFL, everything is a form of intimidation. And it's a form of us giving up our rights by them creating crisis. Ordo ab chao. Do you remember that one? Ordo ab deo. It's Latin for order from crisis. And you must always ask yourself, my friends, when there is a crisis, another Latin term, qui bono. Qui bono. Who benefits? Did you benefit from 9/11? No. Taxes went up, rights went down, and a lot of your sons and daughters bled. Who did benefit from that? The government. More authority, more taxes, more subjects to control. And they did it without a shot being fired. Everyone gave up their rights because of that crisis that got the emotional response that they were after when they formed the crisis. Let us continue. Legal inputs, behavior control, excuses for investigation, search, arrest, or employment of force to modify behavior. Court records, police records, NCIC, driving records, reports made to police, insurance information, anti-establishment acquaintances. Whoa. You mean, why would they put that on? Anti-established acquaintances. If everything that we were trying to educate, and there is a we out there, and there is a movement, and they know we're winning the information war. We're winning the culture war. I've always said our best ammo is knowledge. Knowledge. And that's why we always close this program. You know, seek truth, obtain knowledge, and of course, manifest kindness. Because, folks, they want us battling each other. This Antifa and Black Lives Matter and all these movements, they are all financed by very rich white guys. And they don't give a hoot about the black people. Hell, Sanger set up Planned Parenthood purposely in black neighborhoods to do what? She even writes about it, to decrease the black population, although she didn't say the black population at that time. She said the big N word. Let us continue. I know I'm running out of time already, I'm sorry. But anti-establishment acquaintances, folks, and look at all, this is 1979, look at all the records they're already searching, from telephone tape. So what does that tell you? That tells you, folks, that they were taping everyone even back then. Hell, in 1994, we had Operation Echelon. That was 94. It's 2018. What are they doing now? And we've accepted it, haven't we? We collectively have accepted them listening to our conversations. We know about Vault 4, 7, and 8. We know about the Snowden releases. I've studied them. I've read them to you, a lot of it. Not thousands of pages, but synopsis I have. So we have, understand, folks, that we have been a victim of behavior modification through all these entities, these alphabet entities, the churches, the schools, all of it. The American Medical Association, all of it. Are all behavioral control implementations by the elite. Let us continue real quick. I want to get to a certain point. National input information. Business resources via IRS records, etc. Prices of commodities, sales, investments, bank inventories, production tools and machinery, buildings and improvements, and the stock market. See, what they're talking about here, folks, is the broad spectrum now. National input information. You get it? Everything I've read to you before was what? Methods of coping, of adaptability, behavior, reactions to pain, psychiatric records, political sensitivity, legal inputs. That, everything I have read to you, all of this is geared to individuals. Individuals, you and I. The national input information, business sources via IRS records, etc., price of commodities, sales, investments, bank inventory, production of tools, machinery, buildings, improvements in the stock market, etc., etc. Banking credit bureaus, credit information, payment information, miscellaneous sources, polls, publications, telephone records, energy and utility purchases. Again, that short bit was the national information. Now I'm going to stop here, folks, because next week we're going to get into the short list of outputs. Create controls situations. They just taught you what information and data they put together to use by using shock tests and how they can modify social behavior. What tools are available to them in 1979. So my friends, understand, the war that Lord Acton was talking about between the people and the bankers is taking place today, and this is their playbook. My friends, we're very thankful you take the time to watch our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, to obtain knowledge, manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility. And we thank you for watching.
Got to read. read between the lines. Got to read. Got to read between the lines. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find. Can't believe